All right, friends, so let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully more of you will continue to join. But I just want to say welcome to At Home with Mote. So my name is Dana Henderson. Many of you know me as Miss Dana, and we hold monthly homeschool programs at Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium. And of course, since you guys can't come out to Mote, we wanted to bring Mote to you. So for any of you guys that are not familiar with Mote, we are a marine science research laboratory and aquarium located in Sarasota, Florida. And of course, our number one goal is conservation and sustainability of our oceans. So thank you all so much for being here. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit today, and hope everybody's staying happy and safe at home right now. So today's class is all about being at home with ocean conservation. So what exactly does that mean? Well, I'm glad that you asked. I'm going to tell you. It means that no matter where you live, you have the power to influence the health of our oceans. So whether you live in the mountains or you live on the beach, the choices you make and the things you do matter, okay, all to our ocean. Okay, and all the animals that live there. So how you might ask? Well, it's all about the watershed. The watershed is what we're going to be learning about today, and it's what we're going to be building together later. So the watershed, let's all say it together. The watershed, let's all sing it. Watershed. You guys didn't know you're getting a free concert today, did you? Let's say it like a robot. Watershed. My robot voice needs work. Let's say it with a country accent. Watershed. See, I'm from Tennessee. I can do that. So the watershed. So important. Every single one of you in the back over there. Oh, over there. I see you. I see you hiding. You all live in a watershed, okay? Each one of you live in a watershed. And the things that you do in your home and in your neighborhood affect your watershed. And then your watershed, combined with everyone else's watershed, affects the health of our ocean, okay? So it's all connected. So you might be asking, Miss Dana, just what is a watershed? Anybody know? Well, I'm going to tell you. So let's get started. So friends, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you. I just have a few short and sweet slides to go over and basically learn what is a watershed, what threatens our watersheds, ways that we can protect our watersheds, and then we're going to be working together to build our watershed. Now that pre-lesson I sent out, if you don't have the supplies to do it, no worries, you can help me build. And everything on that list is just suggestions. We're going to be making a model, so really it's up to you. You can get creative and use different materials to make your own watershed, okay? So I keep saying it, watershed, 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 3 times fast. It's kind of hard. Let's figure out what it is. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Thank you for your patience. I am still fairly new to the virtual world. All right, so we are getting at home with ocean conservation, all about those watersheds, okay? So what is a watershed? So let's keep going. So what do you think? When you hear that word watershed, is it water? Is it land? Does it have a lawnmower in it? You know, because it's got the word shed in there. What is it, okay? I made up a little joke. Well, it's not really a joke. I heard that a watershed is an area of land that sheds light on where the water goes. That was terrible. That was a terrible analogy. But anyway, forget I said that. Let's talk about what it is. But it's kind of right. So if you guys look at my little diagram here, this represents a typical Southwest Florida watershed. Now, what a watershed is an area of land that acts almost like a drainage basin. So think of a sink, okay? Now, all the water that hits a particular watershed is all going to end up in the same place, okay? So if you're looking at this watershed diagram we have in front of us here, so all the water that enters this watershed is going to all go downhill using lovely gravity, okay? Interconnected through our rivers, lakes, and stream system down into a single body of water that eventually is going to make its way out to the ocean, okay? So if you're looking up here, so again, all that water ends up in the same spot, okay? So think about a sink. When you turn on the water faucet, okay, it's going to hit the sides of the sink. If everything's totally clear, it just goes directly down the drain. You may have a bowl or a glass or something in there, and that might change the path of the water a little bit, but eventually it's going to end up in the same spot, okay? And that's kind of how a watershed works. Now I want you guys to all look at this South Florida watershed that we have here, this cute little diagram, and I want you to give me some things that you see on the land, or even in the water, really. So what is in this watershed, okay? So what do you guys see? Shout out a couple things for us. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but I am used to teaching with students in front of me, okay? So I miss your faces very, very much. So please interact, use the chat. If I can't answer directly, we have Miss Elena and Miss Lauren that are helping moderate the chat. So if you have questions, please ask them. If we don't get to them during this live stream, go back to our Flipgrid. You all have the link to that. Shoot us a question. We want to make this as interactive as possible, okay? So shout out answers when I ask them, and this will be a lot more fun, okay? So what do you guys see in this particular watershed here? Oh yeah, you see some houses, some cars, right? Okay, so those are some artificial or man-made things in our land, in our watershed. What else do you guys see? Oh yes, manatees. Some of you guys see manatees. Now manatees are in that body of water, right? That all the water is going to eventually end up in. See some roads. What are some natural things that you guys see in there? Oh yeah, I see a hill. My country accent's coming out a little bit, the hill. Trees. Oh, I see someone washing their car. I see someone walking their dog. Absolutely. So pretty much anything that we see, all that the light touches, is part of a watershed, okay? Now, the topography, or the landscape, the layout of the land, will determine where the water goes, okay? So this particular watershed, everything is going to go down into that body of water where we see our manatees. And then if there was a watershed right next to it, the topography or the layout of that land, the water may go to a different body of water, okay? Now I keep talking about water, okay? So we know about the land that's part of the watershed, and that eventually it's going to funnel in to a certain body of water. But where does the water come from? I keep saying when the water hits, oh, yeah, so someone washing their car, right? Ah, exactly right. It's coming from that rain, right? Or the precipitation, okay? So precipitation, snow, sleet, hail, rain that's coming down. So not a whole lot of snow here in South Florida, but that rain that's coming down and hitting, that's kind of the start of our water cycle, right? So we're not going to really get into a lot about the water cycle today, but it's definitely all part of it. Now that rain comes down and hits our watershed, what happens to it? What happens to the rain? What are some things that happen? Where does the water go? Yes, you got it. So it might actually turn into what we call surface water, okay? So surface water is water that is at the surface, right? It's aptly named, okay? So your lakes, your rivers, your streams, your creeks. If you're from Tennessee like me, you might say crick, Okay, so your wetlands, your bays, these are all your surface water, okay, that eventually will run into the ocean, okay, surface water. Now, if it doesn't hit and go into become surface water, what else do you think might happen? Yeah, exactly. It may hit something that we call an impermeable material or an impermeable substance and create something that we call runoff. So if you look at my diagram here, what do you think might be something that's impermeable in our watershed? Yeah, roads, buildings, structures, man-made things, parking lots, things like that, okay? So when the water hits that, it cannot be absorbed, okay? It's an impermeable substance, okay? So it runs off, okay? Just like it says, it runs off. Now, usually, it's gonna run off into a drain, okay? To a storm drain. That storm drain, it's gonna end up in the sewer, and then most likely it's gonna end up in a water treatment plant and then become our drinking water or water that we use, okay? So that runoff. Now, if it hits a permeable substance, it will become what we call groundwater. And again, these names say just what they are, water that's stored in the ground, okay? So how many of you all have ever been to the beach and you dig down, you dig, and if you dig a couple feet down, even if you're back away from the ocean, you will eventually find water, okay? You are finding groundwater, okay? Because that water goes through the permeable sand or the permeable ground, the green spaces, and becomes groundwater, okay? So our ground is filled with water at any particular time. And the last thing, if it goes into this groundwater, it can be actually stored in something called an aquifer. Let's all say it together. Aquifer, sing it, say it like a robot, whatever you want to do, okay? Sometimes when I say things out loud, they stick a little bit better, right? So the aquifer, guys, the aquifer is basically an underground storage area for fresh water, okay? So we're talking fresh water, right? We're talking rain, snow, sleet, this kind of stuff, okay? Now these aquifers are formed by porous or permeable rocks. So again, that permeable is something that can absorb water or that water can actually flow through. Now these aquifers, they can be man-made or they can be natural. And they are a major source of our drinking water, okay? So we actually have a big aquifer located right under Florida that we have actually tapped into, and much of our drinking water comes from it. So what do you think? Is it important to keep our watershed clean and healthy? Duh, right? Absolutely. Look at all these things that depend on the watershed, the clean, healthy watershed. So guys, on the count of 3, let's all say an animal that depends on a healthy watershed. Are you guys ready? 1, 2, 3. Giraffe. Why do I always say giraffe? Giraffe is like my go-to, right? Maybe I need to go to Africa. No giraffes in our watershed here, but they are in an African watershed. But here, guys, all of these animals, I just saw a blue jay out of my window just now, okay? So that blue jay depends on this healthy watershed. So the animals, I don't know about you guys, but I love to play in the ocean, swim in the sea, okay? All these things, we want it to be clean so we can depend on it, right? Nice, healthy watershed. So guys, what are some things that you think threaten our watershed? Yeah, you know it, you all are. So there are some things that are going on with the watershed, right? We all are aware that our world needs a little help, right? And you guys, each one of you, you have the power to do this, to change. I thoroughly believe that it's your generation, well, as long as kids are out there watching, adults too, anyone watching this, we're gonna save the ocean, save the planet, right? Okay, the more we learn about what's threatening our watershed, the more we can help protect it. Now, when we build our watershed, we're gonna talk a little bit more about specifics, things that we can do, specific threats. But really what I want to talk about right now is I want to give you 2 definitions. And if you got the pre-lesson activity guide, you read all about this. So really what's threatening our watersheds? Pollution, right? Pollution. Pollution is bad news, okay? There's all different kinds of pollution, right? Air pollution, water pollution, sound pollution, all these different types of pollution, right? Well, I just want to teach you two main definitions for pollution in the watershed. Now, one of these is called point pollution. Now, point pollution is when a pollutant, which is something that has a negative effect on the environment, comes from a known source. So you know exactly where that pollution is coming from. You see a neighbor pour out motor oil into the lake or something like that, okay? You see a sewage drain coming out of a building going directly into a lake or something like that. That is point pollution. You know exactly where it's coming from. Well, not always do we know where the pollution is coming from. Most of the time, it's something called non-point pollution, okay? And non-point pollution is basically a combination of a bunch of different pollutants coming together, okay, and polluting the body of water. So think about the watershed, okay? So it's that landscape, okay, that it's all downhill basically. Now some of the hills are more gradual than others, depending on if you're in the mountains or you're down at the beach, okay? But when you're making your way down to the ocean, okay, down to sea level, again, gravity is kind of working, okay? So all that water that hits is running off, okay? And along the way, that water is picking up little bits of pollutants here and there and everywhere, okay? They all mix together, okay? And this is what we call stormwater runoff, basically, is especially after a big rain or something like that, all the pollutants get washed out together, okay? And this can be a little bit harder to study, okay, and to pinpoint exactly what's causing certain things because of all of the different runoff, okay, and all the different pollutants. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about specific non-point pollution and point pollution when we create our watershed. So great job, guys. So we're at home with ocean conservation. So we know the watershed is our landscape, okay? When the water hits, it runs into a single body of water, okay? And then eventually all that is connected and it's gonna make their way to the ocean, okay? So this question kind of answers itself. What does the watershed have to do with ocean conservation, okay? And pretty simple, right? It's because all of that water is connected, okay? Through lakes, rivers, tributaries, that sort of intricate river system, okay? It all ends up into the ocean. Now check this out. So Mote is in Sarasota, Florida, okay? And that's where I live too, in Sarasota. Raise your hand if you live in Sarasota. I'm sorry, I can't really see you, but I'm glad you did it. So in Sarasota, I live in the Sarasota Bay. Okay, so if you look right here, so where my arrow is right about where I live, okay? And I live in the Sarasota Bay watershed. So that means that all the water that hits the land at my house, at my work, at Mote, at the Publix, wherever it is, eventually makes its way into Sarasota Bay, okay? Now, in Sarasota Bay, we're actually also a part of a larger watershed known as the Gulf of Mexico watershed, okay? Now, a lot of us in North America are in this Gulf of Mexico watershed. Now, I want you to check this map out, okay? What do you think the brown represents? What do you think? Ah, I see it, yes. Guys, everything that's in brown represents the Mississippi River drainage watershed, okay? So basically, everything that's in brown, all the way up to Montana, when the water hits that, eventually makes its way down to the Mississippi River, okay? And then out right off the coast of Louisiana, okay, right at the mouth of the Mississippi River, okay? So every little thing that's been in that land, in that watershed, eventually can make its way down to the Mississippi River and then out into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, all the yellow is basically just draining into the Gulf of Mexico. So like us in Sarasota Bay, it goes into Sarasota Bay first, and then eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. So this is just wild to me that the topography of the Midwest, okay, and the middle of the United States, and a little bit of the eastern United States too, the way that topography and the hills and the mountains and everything and the have created the streams and the rivers to all come out of the Mississippi River. So what do you guys think this means? Yeah, it means that anything in that watershed is going to come out right at the mouth of the mighty Mississippi. Some of you guys may have heard a couple of years ago, they were having some major issues down there. All these excess nutrients from the watershed, okay, and we're going to learn about what those are, fertilizers, pesticides, chemicals, oil, whatever it may be, are going to come out of the Mississippi River. And what it did was created something called a dead zone, okay? There was so much stuff coming out there that created this kind of dead zone, okay? And unfortunately, that's what can happen, okay? When our watershed is unhealthy, okay, and there are pollutants that are running off into our waterways, it can cause big trouble, okay? And there's a couple of things locally that it can do as well. Now, one thing, and if you were in the plankton class last week, we talked a little bit about harmful algal blooms, okay? So one thing that can happen when there are too many, and Mote is doing a lot of studies on this, there's a lot left to learn, but we have found when there are excess nutrients in the watershed and they run off into our bays, then into our ocean, it can cause these harmful algal blooms, okay? Now, many of these nutrients are coming from non-point solution, so it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what can kind of fuel these harmful algal blooms. But scientists pretty much agree that that the excess nutrients can cause it, okay? But there's still a lot left to learn about what exactly ones are the ones doing it, okay? So it can cause this. And anyone that's ever experienced a red tide, which is a type of a harmful algal bloom from Corynea brevis, the phytoplankton we learned about last week, you know that not only does it kill wildlife, but it also can have pretty bad effects on us and the way we breathe. It's very stinky when you go out to the ocean, and you can't eat any of the fish that are in there. So pretty bad news that can all come from an unhealthy watershed, right? Now, another thing that can happen that you guys are probably already aware of, oh, we already talked about this a little bit, guys. So this is the Florida Red Tide Mitigation and Technology Development Initiative. Say that 8 times fast. I promise you can't. But we already touched on it. A little bit of research or a lot of research that we're doing at Mote about those harmful algal blooms. And again, trying to pinpoint and figure out what is causing the blooms, how can we stop them, and move forward there. But what I was saying is that an unhealthy watershed can cause a lot of harm to wildlife, right? Now, how many of you all have ever been somewhere that was having a celebration? A celebration, let's party. I can't wait to hear some of your songs that you guys come up with. Last week, some of you had some amazing plankton songs. Coco, Bryce, Amelia, I loved your songs. So if you come up with a song about watersheds, please share it. I do like to randomly bust out in song from time to time. But guys, it can cause so much harm to wildlife if we don't celebrate properly. So how many of you all have ever been to a party or a memorial or something like that, and they release helium balloons? I know when I was a kid, we used to do it, right? You write a little note on there, you tie it to the balloon, you release it. Now I'm from Tennessee, so I was in Tennessee writing this, oh, if you find this, you know, send me a letter or something like that, right? What do you guys think really happens to those balloons? Yeah, they become part of our watershed. They pop in the atmosphere or whatever they hit, they come back down and they get into our watershed. Now we all know everything that ends up in the watershed is going to get in our water and eventually into our ocean, okay? So no matter where you are, if you're in the middle of the country and you release that helium balloon, you have the potential to harm marine life. Now check out this guy here. This is a patient that came into our whale and dolphin hospital. His name was Anakin, and Anakin is one of the most endangered types of sea turtles. He's a Kemp's Ridley sea turtle, and actually Sea Turtle Patrol just started today, so sea turtle season. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But check out what's coming out of his mouth. That is a ribbon from a balloon. Okay, so what happened was Anakin, this amazing endangered sea turtle swimming around in the ocean and sees a balloon. Okay, now a deflated balloon with a ribbon hanging behind it looks surprisingly like a squid, or surprisingly, some of them I've seen them even look like crabs kind of swimming around. Okay, especially jellyfish, for those the leatherbacks that eat jellyfish. So when they're in there, Anakin, he mistook it for food. So he actually ate the balloon, okay? Now, luckily, we were able to remove that balloon, and Anakin was released. And hopefully he's out there living a happy, healthy life. But just goes to show you how bad releasing something into our atmosphere that's going to end up in our watershed can be for our wildlife. Now, Mote is busy helping all these animals, so don't worry if they do eat a balloon and we are able to find them. Our strandings department, my good friend Gretchen, shout out to Gretchen if she's watching, will go out and actually rescue these animals, bring them back to our hospital, fix them up, and our main goal is to get them back out into the wild, okay? So if they are affected by red tide, which could have been from an unhealthy watershed, or if they have ingested marine debris, which is trash that ends up in our oceans, right? Any of these things could be big trouble and could be fatal for them. So they'll come into our hospital and we're able to take care of them. So friends, or should I call you watershed warriors, okay, out there to protect our watersheds, I think it's time that we build one together, okay? Because we want to learn what can really affect these watersheds, okay? We see the animals, we see the effects, okay? So what can we do? So what we're going to do now is we are going to build a watershed. Everyone sing your best watershed song. Okay, now is the time. I'm going to stop the share. Hello. Okay, so now is the time. If you have, oh, actually guys, let me go back and share this again. Because I just want to show you. Okay, so I know I asked you guys to collect a lot of supplies. If you did not, don't worry. Okay, you're going to help me build. Okay, I need all the help I can get. But this video will be available on YouTube, and if you want to come back and do it again later, please do. Okay, so and these are all just suggested supplies. Anything we do during At Home at Mote, they're going to be all just suggestions on things to gather. So if you don't have exactly what I asked you to gather, just, you know, use your best guess, just whatever you have available, okay? So we're doing representations of certain things, so modeling of certain things. So as long as you know this represents that, then that's all you need, okay? So here are some of the things that we're going to use today. Okay, again, if you don't have everything, no worries, but we're going to build our watershed, all right? So the first step that we're gonna do dun, 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 is we're going to create the natural topography of our watershed, okay? So who can remember what topography means? Yes, you got it. It's the natural sort of landscape, the lay of the land. Is it a beach? Is it very hilly? Are there lots of trees? Okay, are there lots of mountains? Okay, so we're going to create that natural topography. So, all right, so guys, give me just a moment. I'm going to move my chair out of the way. Okay, I'm going to kind of angle this down. All right, guys, and again, I am new to this kind of thing, so if at any time you can't see or you need to me to repeat something or anything, please let me know, okay? So what I'm going to use as the base of my watershed is a paint tray. And you can see this is just an old paint tray that I've used a million times. We always encourage the use of recycled or natural materials, okay? Definitely did not expect anyone to go out and buy a paint tray. Now, if you don't have a paint tray, you can use just a metal roasting pan, a clear tray, whatever you have, okay? But the reason I like to use the paint tray is because it already has that sort of natural, gradual incline that all of our watersheds have, okay? Now, just for today, I'm going to prop it up even more. I'm going to put a book under the one side. Okay, so this up here is going to represent our part of our watershed with higher elevation and down to our ocean or our large body of water, okay? Now, I think I'm going to create the Sarasota Bay watershed, but I'm going to do something bigger. Okay, I'm going to create it all the way up to the Appalachian Mountains, or Appalachian Mountains, however you want to say it, okay? Now, I don't know how many of you, I'm going to just pop in here real quick. Hello. I don't know how many of you all saw Dr. Tracy Fanera's kid conversation on our Mote Education Facebook page. If you didn't, go check it out. Someone asked her, why is the ocean salty? And she explained that weather over millions of years has broken down the mountains and rocks and basically got into the ocean and made it salty. Well, that's also true of sand, okay? Now, I don't know how many of you know, but the sand from Siesta Key has come from the Appalachian Mountains, that beautiful quartz. So that's kind of what I'm going to set up. I'm going to make my Gulf of Mexico, okay, my Siesta Key beach, maybe like some hills of Georgia up to the Appalachian Mountains, okay? So first thing we're gonna do is create our topography. Now there's a couple ways you can do it, okay? I am going to use newspaper, and these are just like the little ads you get in the mail. And I'm gonna create two big mountains in the back, okay? So I got my painter's tape here. Okay. And then I'm just going to make a big old mountain in the back, and I'm going to tape it down. Now you could also use like a small cup or whatever. Okay, so I got my one big mountain here. I'm going to tear another little piece. Make a smaller mountain. Okay, I'm going to put that one right there. Again, guys, what we're doing is we're creating the natural topography of our watershed. Okay, so I'm just going to add those two. Okay, all right, so we've got our mountains in the back. Now, if you have a tablecloth or you have a trash bag, white or a light color works better because you can see things a little bit easier. So I'm gonna take, okay, I'm gonna just cover my tray. Okay, all right. You guys kind of see that a little bit? All right. So now got my little cat hair in my watershed. All right. So we've got our mountains up here. Okay. Between those mountains, create a valley. Okay. All right. So we've kind of got the topography of our watershed going on. So you can see mine goes from the ocean up to the mountains. So now let's add a couple other natural elements of our watershed, okay? Well, we know that mine ends in the ocean. Okay, so I'm just gonna take some water and I'm just gonna, okay. So if you don't have a paint tray and you're just using a tub or a tray or something like that, just make sure you pour just enough in there to kind of give the illusion of water. Now, one thing you can do if you'd like to see your water a little bit better is you can add a tiny bit of food coloring. Okay. My Easter colors here, it's a little bit of teal, just so we can kind of see that that's our ocean. Oh yes, the mountains to the sea. Okay. All right, so what are some other natural elements that you guys think we should add to our watershed? Yes, oh, I love it, yes. Let's add a little bit of sand. Okay. Now I am doing a model of Siesta Key sand, but I just grabbed some sand from my yard, which is not quite as beautiful and white, but you know. Okay. Some of it will run into my water, but that's all right. A little bit of sand. Okay, so we got our beach. Okay, oh, beautiful. What are some other natural elements we might find in our watershed? Yeah, got some leaves right here that might represent some trees. These are some live oak leaves. Okay, to our mountain. Okay. Ooh, I also have a little Spanish moss, represents some natural. Oh yes, look at that. So we've got our water, we've got some of our natural elements, okay? Now one thing that I like to add for the natural elements is a sponge, okay? So again, ask permission before you cut up a sponge, but when we talk about groundwater, think about the ground as being a big sponge. Okay, it absorbs. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna just, how about up here? I think I made my mountains too big. Okay, all right. So I like to add the sponge just as a bit of a visual to show that green space is so important for absorbing the groundwater, okay? Now, who can remember what is located under the ground of water sometimes? Or that the water is stored in? Yes, an aquifer, okay? So we get a lot of our fresh water from an aquifer, okay? So I think let's add a couple aquifers. Now, I have a bowl of various plastic bottle caps. So at Mote, guys, we save everything. All of our recycled stuff, anything, we save it so we can use it later. Now, I'm going to add an aquifer. Okay, just under here. Okay, so the water will flow down. Luckily, this water is located under this natural green space. Okay, and it's going to collect in that underground aquifer. Okay, so if you have a bottle top, then go ahead and place it somewhere in your watershed to create that aquifer, okay? All right, any other natural stuff that we wanna add to our watershed? Yeah, the people and the animals, right? We've got the plants, okay, that depend on that clean watershed. We've got the topography. Let's add some other things. So I don't have a ton of stuff at my house, but I have this ping pong ball. Any guesses what that might represent? It represents oh yes, rocks. Rocks would be good. I did not grab rocks for whatever reason. So yes, if you have rocks, please use those. You could even use rocks instead of the newspaper. Okay, if you wanted to do this completely natural, you could just do big boulders in the back. Okay, so my ping pong ball is going to represent people. It just kind of reminded me of like a beach ball or something. So I don't actually have any tiny people here to put in there. And then I have a fish. I'm going to put in there. I have a whale. Okay. So if you guys have other land animal toys to put around, please do so. Or use some recycled materials to represent things, okay? All right. So we've got all of our natural stuff. Oh, it's looking beautiful. So I'm going to just share my screen with you really quick. Dun, dun, dun. Oh my gosh, it's hard to do this when the thing is angled, you guys. Okay, so we created our natural topography of our watershed, okay? And we added the aquifers, okay? What else is in our watershed that we want to add? Yeah, we want to add our we already did our natural elements, sorry. We want to add our artificial elements, right? So we did our topography and however you want to do it. We did our natural stuff. We added our aquifers. So now we're going to add our artificial stuff. So what do you guys think are some artificial things that are in our watershed? Yes, absolutely. So buildings, okay. So guys, I'm a developer and I found this really cool spot up in the mountains and I'm going to clear it. I'm going to clear all this natural space. Get that out of there. No trees up here. I'm going to create a city. Okay. So you guys can use any impermeable things to create your city. If you have actual little houses, that would be cool. Okay. All right, so we got our little city. Let me, so you guys can see it. Put my little city up in the back. Okay, that doesn't have the green spaces around it, okay? So we got some different bottle caps back there. So we've got our cityscape up in the mountains. Now guys, if we were hanging out in the mountains, but we wanted to make our way down to the beach, how would we get there? Yes, a road. Now guys, there's a couple different ways you can make a road. Again, you can use any impermeable substance. I am going to use this piece of duct tape. If you have clay works really well. Well, that's not easy to, okay. Oh, not when building over. So I've got my couple roads. Maybe this road is leading, okay, somewhere else. All right. Looks exactly like a watershed, doesn't it, you guys? So, sorry, my screen is tilting. Okay, so what we've got going on here, guys, is we've got our city, okay? We've got our roads, okay? And anything else you guys can think of that could be artificial in our watershed, okay? So cars, boats, parking lots, okay? These are things that are not natural, but that are found in the watershed, okay? All right. How you guys doing out there? Okay, so looks like we're doing pretty good. So we've got our natural topography. We've got our aquifers in there, so we can collect some water, hopefully to have some drinking water. We've got our natural elements. We've got our trees, our sand, our beach, okay? We've got our artificial elements. We've got our buildings, our roads, okay? So there's one thing to do. And let's make it rain, everybody. So we're gonna make it rain. So we talked about where the rain is, or where the water in the watershed is coming from, okay? And that is from precipitation. Now you guys have a couple of different options to make it rain, okay? Now you can use, if you want to simulate the water cycle, okay, you can use these cotton balls. Okay, so think about when the water is evaporating, goes up into the clouds, okay? It condenses, okay, into a cloud. And then when those clouds become full, that's when it rains, okay? So you can also use a spray bottle to make it rain, okay? So what I want you all to do now, if you are making one with me, if not, I want you to determine where you think the water is going to go once I make it rain on my watershed, okay? So gonna make it rain, make a prediction, what is going to happen? Okay, so storm's coming, it is raining. Oh yes. Now, depending on what the topography of your watershed is going to determine the path of your water, right? So you guys play around with it. Change up the way your mountains are, make them smaller, make them farther apart, okay? So see if you can create lakes, rivers, streams, see where that water is pooling, okay? Because that's what's happening in nature, okay? Depending on the topography and the way the water is flowing, that's why certain areas have lakes, that's why certain areas are rivers and flowing, okay? So play around with it. So make it rain either with your cotton ball or with your spray bottle. All right, good job, guys. Now, I wish I could say that that's everything that's in our watershed, right? Oh, the sponge represents green space, okay? So it represents ground that the water goes through and can actually be absorbed into the ground, okay? So it represents a permeable substance, okay? That is much better for the watershed because it prevents that runoff, okay? Great question. Okay, so the reality is this isn't everything in our watershed, right? Okay, and sometimes things get added to the watershed that can cause big trouble, okay? So let's think about it. What are some, and since this class is all about at home with ocean conservation, let's think about some things. So let's say maybe this is my house down here, okay? So I'm not right by the water, but close enough, okay? So let's think of some things that you use at your house that can end up in our watershed, okay? So let's think about it, okay? Start throwing them out for me, guys. What do you think? What do you think? Yes, you got it. So all different kinds of pollutants, right? So the first one that I saw was trash, okay? Trash and plastic. So unfortunately, guys, go ahead and throw some plastic in there, okay? A lot of the things that we use can end up in our watershed, right? And just like with Anakin, can be big problems, okay? Now, how many of you have heard of microplastics? So microplastics are tiny, tiny little plastics that end up in our watershed and often are not able to be filtered out in treatment plants and that kind of thing. So because plastics can leave a residue, I have chose to use chia seeds for my microplastics. Because I don't know about you guys, know how much you know about chia seeds, but when they get wet, they get kind of gross. And that can happen with plastic over time. It can start to leach out chemicals. Okay. Ooh, I saw someone say dog waste. Perfect. Now I have chocolate sprinkles to represent. A little for me. Oh, thank you. Don't mind if I do. Yum. So yeah, if you have a dog and you don't pick up your dog poo, it ends up in the watershed, right? Okay. What else we got? Yeah, the things that you use in the shower, your detergents. I'm just using some flour to represent that. Okay. Soaps. Okay, laundry detergent. I'm using some food coloring to represent that. Okay. Oh no, you guys. There's a truck coming down and he spilled some oil out. I'm just using syrup to represent the oil. You could also use food coloring to represent. Oh man, toxic spill. Ah, oh, toxic spill. Okay. Anything else that we forgot? Oh, cleaning products, pesticides. Yep, you got it. So maybe this business up here really wants, oh, plastic bags. Absolutely, we got some bags in here. So maybe this little cityscape wants to, I don't know, have a really, really pristine yard, uses fertilizers. Okay, uses pesticides. All right, guys, so we've added some unfortunate stuff to our watershed, and I think I hear thunder. Oh, I think a storm's coming. So guys, let's make it rain again. Now what's happening when we make it rain? All those pollutants are running off, right? All that dog poo, all those fertilizers, all those pesticides, okay? All of those things are running into our watershed. That's getting into our bodies of water, okay? And then getting into our ocean, causing major trouble, okay? Now, we're not gonna do this during this class because we're running out of time. I appreciate your patience. But I want you and your family to think about, how do we clean this up, okay? What do we do? What are some efforts that we can do to clean all this stuff up, okay? All right. Let me, okay. Whoops, sorry guys, wrong screen. So, my watershed is a little bit of a hot mess. But I really just want to get the point across to you guys that everything that we do in our watersheds affects our waterways and affects our oceans, okay? So I just want to, okay, made it rain. So what are some things that we can do to help our watershed? For all of you watershed warriors out there, and I know all of you love marine life and love to protect it, okay? What are some things that we can do, okay? So I have a list here. I'm not gonna read every single one of them. We already talked about helium balloons. cleaning up your dog's poop, all of those things. My number 1 and 2 on here, really use products that are plant-based, that are not going to add all these extra nutrients, all these phosphates and these kind of things into our watershed that possibly could fuel things like harmful algal blooms. Keeping your yard wild, okay? Native plants, those kind of things. If you don't have to use pesticides, don't have to use fertilizers, this is going to help protect our watersheds, okay? One quick thing I wanted to show you on here is to be mindful of what you flush, okay? Because everything we flush ends up in our water, in our sewage treatment plant, and eventually could end up being back into our water supply, right? So one thing, if you have something called a flushable wipe, if it says flushable wipe on there, it is not actually flushable, okay? So keep that in mind. Just because it says flushable, it may not be, okay? So all those wipes and that kind of stuff, those go in the trash, all right? So just a couple different things. If you have something additional to add to this list, please let us know. Make a video, put it on our Flipgrid so we can all make sure that we are good watershed warriors. All right, guys, so thank you so much for joining me and making this watershed. I hope you all had fun. I had fun. Mine is very messy, but you know, if you saw my yard, you would understand. My yard's pretty messy too. Keeping it wild, right? Saving the ocean, saving the planet. So we do have 2 more scheduled at home with Motes for April. Next week is all about turtles. So for the turtle one and the mammal one, I'm going to be coming to you live from Mote, which is very exciting. So the turtle one, you'll get to meet our education turtles, and we'll learn all about sea turtle season and sea turtle research at Mote, because today is the first day of sea turtle nesting season, which is very, very exciting. And then on the 29th, we're going to be doing all about learning all about marine mammals as larger than life animals, okay? So you can visit mote.org/education online to register, and that's also where you're going to find all sorts of information, all sorts of cool things. We also have our Google Classroom that has tons of just static stuff that's already there. So many different activities for you and your families to do and learn. So there's still lots of ocean conservation to be done, and we need your help no matter where you are. If you're home, if you're wherever, I guess we're all home right now, right? So please go to the Flipgrid, share a picture of your watershed, okay? Especially if you get one perfect, all right? If you get one with all the lakes, valleys, and streams, and you make it go just right, okay? And make sure we keep that watershed clean, and we're gonna save ocean animals by doing that. So I thank you all so very much for joining us. Please have a wonderful day at home, and I'll see you next week for At Home with Turtles. Bye.